We will now continue with historian Professor Dr. Gerald Horne.
For Pacifica Radio, KPFK Los Angeles, this is Gerald Horne, and with me on the line is Kalonji Changa, co-editor of Beyond Cop Cities, Dismantling Corporate Funding, Armies, and Prisons. Thank you for joining us on Freedom Now, KPFK, Comrade Kalonji.
It is an honor and it's a pleasure, Comrade Gerald Horne.
Right on. So why did you produce this book?
Well, this book, it stems from a number of different interviews that we put together on RSTV, Black Power Media, and also writings that Dr. Joy James and I had produced for a number of different publications, including Harvard's Inquest magazine and I believe Truth Out and a couple others that come to mind. And this actually was her idea in regards to making it a book. We knew that Cop City, it is a growing phenomenon, not just in Atlanta, but, across the U.S. And we wanted to kind of tap into, the whole idea, because we know that Cop City is not a new thing. We know that it stems from militarized policing. It stems from the military itself. But at the same time, I like to say there's no Cop City. It's just a police state, period. But this is what it's called. So, we kind of, decided to jump in and give perspective. And that's kind of what happened.
Now, my understanding is that the Cop City struggle in Atlanta centered around building of a major fortress for the police department, and it envisioned fortifying the police department with a certain number of powers. Is that a fair rendition? And do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I would say that, yes, it is. It's definitely a fair rendition. And I think that, again, we're looking at, it's a corporate funded project. It is it's what secular states use to maintain hegemony, not just in the United States, but again, internationally. So it is a microcosm of a macrocosm, so we know that, with over 900 military bases across the world, we know that in order to maintain wars domestically, there has to be a level of training that has to be up, because of the fact that we know that there's a concerted effort to maintain domination as a whole. So I think that Cop Cities is a necessary base or small barrack or military base or whatever, paramilitary compounds that any quote unquote intelligent and any intelligent imperialist would use. So that's how we kind of see it.
Now, my understanding is that military materiel is transferred from the Pentagon to U.S. cities. Would this be flashlights, grenade launchers, sandbags, tanks, all of the above? Anything else?
I would say all of the above, but I think that the thing is, when you talk about, again, the Pentagon, and you talk about the military and the police, of course, the police are the military arm of the local military arm. And not only are these supplies that you mentioned transported from the from the Pentagon, the actual training itself goes not just from the U.S. military, but as we pointed out in the book, training from abroad by, Israeli soldiers. Here in Atlanta, they have what's called the Gilley program. And Gilley is the Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange. And the Gilley program over the past 31 years, police here in Georgia have been training in Israel, in Jerusalem in particular, around, with their military. They actually send out top brass not just Atlanta, but Georgia police officers who learn different tactics. And this has been going on for the past 30 plus years. So not only is it tied, to what's going on in the Pentagon, not only is supplying weapons, but it's an international concerted effort. And we like to draw the line, not just because of the fact that folks just look at cop cities and they're like, okay, well, this is something in Atlanta. It's just this $90,000, over $100 million project that that's just taking place because they want to have a playground for police officers, when in fact this is it is about domestic imperialism. And this training not only it's not only conducted by military forces here and Israelis, so on and so forth, but we would make the connection to the School of Americas, because a lot of these same folks come out of that particular camp. And the same policing that takes place here in the U.S., of course, it takes place in the Caribbean, Latin America, and all over the planet. So it's tied in beyond, and that's why we say it's beyond cop cities. It's not just a local thing. And I know that folks have been talking about how cop cities are sprouting out across America, and they have this campaign to stop cop city. But the reality is, when you look at cop cities, particularly here in Atlanta, this is something that's been 10, 15 years in the making. So we're just getting on board. And to me, if there's a cop cities or not, it's not going to slow down the murders, the over 1,500 murders of citizens here in the United States yearly, by the various police departments, across the country. So, for the record, myself, even though I'm in Atlanta, I didn't spend much time on the ground protesting, because of the fact that I understand that there are a number of different components. Again, not just police agencies, not just the Atlanta Police Foundation, which is the local union here, but major corporations. So you're not fighting a war against the city of Atlanta. You're not even fighting a war against the state of Georgia. You're fighting, imperialism. You're up against a paramilitary force.
Now, what you've said thus far suggests an implicit, if not explicit, tie between war abroad, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Gaza, and war at home. Could you speak to that question?
I think what we have to realize, war is war. And when you're talking about domination, when you're talking about death and destruction, it is, it's a part of a war machine. So indeed, as we know, oftentimes there are military personnel, there are soldiers who come back from war and they become local police officers. And, with that, they utilize the same tactics and training. So these particular trained enforcers, they see the folks locally as insurgents in these communities they don't live in when they go to serve them. So yes, tying in, and we've seen footage of, some of the cop city training where they're actually going to places like Jerusalem. So when you talk about the tie-in between like Iraq and Afghanistan, and even places like the Sudan, and places like, the whole Ukraine-Russia conundrum, we recognize it holistically, because these same soldiers, like I said, are training individuals locally. So the tie-in, again, it's about full spectrum war, full control. And if we look at it from the way the American medical system looks at it, if we don't look at it holistically, we can fight a symptom, but that's not going to stop the disease. And the disease is white supremacy. The disease is hegemony. It's imperialism, and it's the way of the world. These are the same soldiers. Again, these are local soldiers. I think that one thing we don't look at, we have to say, what is the role of police here in the United States? The role of police here in the United States is the same role of the international police, which is the military. It's to maintain control. It's to maintain domination. And until we look at it holistically, we'll continue to run on this wheel like a lab mouse or something. And we'll just keep running around in circles until one day there's none of us left to run around anywhere. So it is a international prison that's being built. And so to your question, I know I went all the way around the world. Indeed, it is absolutely tied from top to bottom.
Well, just as a footnote to what you just articulated, some years ago, I did a book about the liberation struggle in Zimbabwe. And the racist minority regime in Southern Africa was fortified post-1975 with the arrival of embittered Euro-American soldiers who had just been defeated in Vietnam and then came to Southern Africa to try to prevent African liberation. Right now, I'm working on a book that deals with the post-U.S. Civil War, post-1865, when Confederate, that is to say, pro-enslaving forces, migrated en masse to Egypt, where they spearheaded an invasion of Ethiopia a few years later, which had as a purpose the enslaving of East Africans who could then be transported to slave markets in Turkey, now Turkey. So it seems that the sooner we recognize the inevitable time between the domestic and the global, will always be outnumbered and outgunned, which brings me to the next question, the Stop Cop City movement. Talk to us about that movement and tell us in particular, does it have support from unions?
In regards to the Cop City movement, I think that there are some sincere forces. I think that there are some, and I was actually a part of a national Cop City convening just last month. And you have some sincere forces like most movements and struggles do. But I think that one of the things that is lacking is a clear and concrete politic. I think that the political education around Cop City, I think that there's a lack because to me, it is in desperate need of strategy. And I think that sometimes folks believe that this fight, we can shout them down like the walls of Jericho. We have to understand again that we are up against now the Biden administration, which, like all U.S. administrations, have funded apartheid and occupation of places like Palestine. Of course, they funded mercenaries to maintain apartheid South Africa. The U.S. has funded the violent death of thousands of Palestinians after the Hamas situation last year, the October 2023 piece, and it's an ongoing situation. So I think that the Cop City movement, while I believe it means well, I believe that again there are some very sincere forces who I respect and I honor, and many of them I love, but I think that it's a lack of a coherent plan, because I think that folks confuse being angry and being upset as some type of as an action. I think sometimes folks believe that we can protest this away. They believe that we can shout it away. They believe we can put together petitions, and when you're dealing with violent oligarchy, when you're dealing with individuals who are hell-bent on the destruction of the planet, because Cop City is one of the things that we appreciate, is that there are environmentalists involved who understand that here we are in Georgia, the most forested city in America, and they're chopping down hundreds of acres to build a military base in essence. So to the question of unions supporting it, the only unions that we know of are the unions that are against this situation, and that would be the police unions themselves. Now, if there are other unions that are backing it right now at this time, I don't know anything about that. But like I said, the main union is the Atlanta Police Foundation, and these are the people who are funding and aiding in the destruction of not only, again, people, citizens, but the environment and ultimately the planet. So again, it's that small microcosm of the macrocosm.
Who was Tortuguita?
Tortuguita was a young environmentalist, and he was were in the forest. You have a number of different defenders, forest defenders, and he was one of the forest defenders who was violently murdered. Manuel Tortuguita Esteban Paez Teran, 26-year-old. And he simply was, protesting, the destruction of these ancestral forests. And they claimed that he fired a gun at an officer. This was in January of 2023. But what ended up happening was there was a private autopsy. And in that private autopsy, they found that Tortuguita had been sitting cross-legged on the ground with their hands raised when Georgia troopers shot them 57 times. They riddled Tortuguita's body with bullets. A Georgia state trooper was shot and injured. And we're pretty certain that that was friendly fire from another police officer. So after the murder of this young person, public information was found that showed that that the shooting, that police that were involved in the shooting started to distribute flyers in the neighborhood where one of the officers lived, and the police jailed it was organizers that were distributing the information, and police ended up jailing some of them for stalking and felony intimidation. This was after Tortuguita's death. These young folks decided to protest in this neighborhood, and the mere act of protesting, the mere act of saying this is disgusting that you've murdered our comrade and our friend, and it's this young individual, they decided to ramp up, this terroristic act.
So what has been the upshot? Is the struggle continuing around this death?
I think that for many of us, we look at Tortuguita for what Tortuguita is and was, and simply he's a casualty. They are a casualty of war, and it has to be fought holistically. So his name is raised, and his mother, I believe she's in Panama, if I'm not mistaken. I interviewed her last year on my show. But I think that folks are continuing to fight in Tortuguita's name. But again, holistically, we have to remember Tortuguita as we remember George Floyd, as we remember Sean Bell, as we remember Abner Louima, who was sodomized in New York, as we remember Oscar Grant over on the West Coast where you are, and as we remember the brothers and sisters who are being slaughtered currently in the Sudan, those in the Congo, those in Haiti, who the U.S. has a vested interest in dominating and destroying that particular country and the people there. and and utilizing, as you talked about earlier, some of the connections, utilizing the Kenyan soldiers to attack their own brothers and sisters in the name of getting paid. Just saying it what it is. And of course, we've heard reports recently that they hadn't received a check yet for that, but they are running dogs for the state. And we know that it's, again, that connection is, that we utilize this wherever we are. The unfortunate thing about Atlanta, Georgia, they say it's the Black Mecca. And the only thing that we can have in common with a Mecca is that it's a desert. So it is indeed a Black Mecca, but it's not, and as our brother and comrade, the Ruba Ben Wahab, will point out, the slaves run the plantation here. So, as you can see, when you look at the protesters of Cop City, it's been others that have kind of dominated that particular piece. And I think part of that issue is because Africans here in Atlanta, they know full well that with or without a Cop City, their communities are already occupied. They're already under attack. They're already under assault. They have a police dog now. They got police robots and all that other stuff. So the thing is, it is a testing ground. It is a place where there's over 20,000 cameras just on the streets of Atlanta. But yet it doesn't deter crime. It doesn't deter, this militarized policing. It's business as usual. And whenever anything happens, no one knows anything. That camera wasn't working, or, whatever the case is. But indeed, it is, Tortuguita's name, will continue to be held because, there's another life lost.
Are there any gender components of this Stop Cop City movement?
Gender components in regards to?
Well, was there a representation of women in the movement or feminists in the movement? Is there a disproportionate impact upon Black men, for example, with regard to this increase in police terrorism, for example?
Right. No, I would say it would be fair to say that there are all types of gender involvement. I would say that, there are, and I think that's a beautiful thing, that you have all types of individuals who identify in whatever way, fashion, or form that they do, who have been participating in this war against terror, because they understand that we are the victims of war and terror. We're not the terrorists. But at the same time, of course, we know that, as far as the victims themselves, it definitely, it's, I believe it would be fair to say that, of course, there's been more Black men killed, more Black people as a whole, Black men, women, children, etc. So, I would chalk it as that. But like I said, as far as folks who are participating in that fight, it is, I think it would be safe to say that in many cases, it's all hands on deck. And remember that Cop Cities is not just in Atlanta. It is, across the U.S. right now. And, of course, it's been across the U.S. because, I for one, I don't even like the name Cop Cities. Again, it's a police state. And I think that, every now and then we come up with, different terms and phrases, so on and so forth. But, you can call it cocky, you can call it feces, and you can call it something else that I'm not going to say on your show, but it's the same old stuff.
Finally, Comrade Kalonji, co-editor of the book Beyond Cop Cities, Dismantling Corporate-Funded Armies and Prisons, I understand you have a YouTube channel. Talk to us about that and how interested audience members can follow you.
Right on. So first and foremost, I would like to start with the most important thing by saying I am one of the founders of FTP Movement, which is my organization. I am a quote-unquote activist first. I'm a organizer first. So I will always want to point that out because I don't ever want to be thought of as just this or just that. Not that any of that stuff is unimportant, but I want folks to recognize that, the tradition that come in. But yes, I'm the co-founder of Black Power Media, and it can be found at Black Power Media Reloaded on YouTube, Black Power Media Reloaded. And we've had a ton of great guests, including yourself, and hopefully we can get you back on soon. And folks like, the Daruba Ben Wahaz, the Cornell Wests, and the Dr. Joy Jameses, and, so many others have come through and supported, what it is we've been attempting to do. Black Power Media is a little over 3 years old right now. And, we're constantly growing, and we appreciate the opportunity to, speak with folks who are smarter than us, as my father would say.
I see. Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there, Comrade Kalonji. Thank you for joining us on Freedom Now, KPFK, Los Angeles.